All right. Hi, everyone. We're all we're all getting settled. I think this is each of our first silent panel before. So greetings, everyone. My name is Martha Cavazos, and I am the program lead at Sustainable Ocean Alliance. I'm standing in for Erica Nunez from the Ocean Foundation today. And as one of the organizers of this panel, I'm really honored and excited to be here today with some of our outstanding folks connected to SOA and part of our broader Sustainable Ocean Alliance. We came together actually, Masha, who we'll introduce shortly from Planet Care, came to Sustainable Ocean Alliance and said, hey, I don't think that we're talking about microplastics enough. And from what I can see in the conference ahead, this needs to really be a conversation that's elevated. And so we're really excited to have the stage, the platform today, to bring more nuance, to bring more complexity, to bring more wisdom and insight from the ground of folks really working directly in the microplastics world today to think about what that means for our ocean's health, what types of innovations, what types of policies, what types of programs are really essential to not only elevating the narrative overall, but also just really ensuring that we understand this as an essential theme in how we continue to restore our ocean. So, with that being said, we're going to do a round of introductions. You can see everyone's beautiful headshots and bios on the screen behind us. But I'm just going to go down and I'd like to introduce Kristen first. Kristen from Sati Sanitary Pads, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're excited to be here today.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Hi everyone, I'm Kristen. I'm one of the co-founders of Sati, and we make biodegradable and compostable sanitary pads from banana and bamboo fiber. We're based in India, in Gujarat, and we're excited to be here today because microplastics are a huge issue for sanitary pads. Regular sanitary pads are primarily made of plastic. And because they don't decompose, they just degrade over time, they become all of the little microplastics that end up either in the ocean or in the land. And so that's one of the things that we want to kind of address today. Thanks.
Thank you, Kristen. And now we have Emma. Emma, would you like to say a few words?
Hi everyone, I'm Emma Holland-Lindsay. I'm Head of Public Affairs at the Women's Institute. We are the largest voluntary women's organisation in the UK. We have about 200,000 members, and they are part of about 5,500 community groups in the UK. And we are an educational charity. So we exist really to bring women together, offer them the chance to learn new skills, and how I get to be here is campaign on the issues that matter to them and their communities. And we've got a long history of campaigning on environmental issues. We started working on ocean pollution in 1927, but what brings us here today is we have a particular focus on microfiber shedding through washing synthetic clothing. So our current campaign, it's called End Plastic Soup, focuses on finding solutions to that particular problem, which has been quite hidden, I suppose, not a very well-known aspect of plastic pollution. So very excited to be here and talk about this with all of you today.
Thank you, Emma. Masha.
Hi everyone, my name is Masha. I am Planet Care Sustainability Lead. Planet Care is a startup business. We make microfiber filters for washing machine. And as Martha already said, we've really noticed that there's a lot going on about marine plastic pollution, and I've been to many, many sessions this week, and it's great to see all the momentum that's built around this, and it's been long overdue. But really I am a bit disappointed that, microplastics is not on the agenda because, I am very much pro cleaning up the oceans of the plastic bottles and all the debris and the ghost gear that, we can easily see. But the issue with microplastics is, once it's out there, it's really, really difficult to get it out. So we really must not overlook this pollution. So we are really grateful to Forum Oceano and the Sustainable Ocean Alliance for making this panel happen. And thank you very much for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. And again, a special shout out to one of our Sustainable Ocean Alliance partners, Oceano, for having us here today as well. And as you can hear from all of these panelists, I mean, really what we want to emphasize is the opportunity we have to elevate what's often overlooked and completely unseen when it comes to eliminating plastic pollution in our ocean today. So excited to dive into that a little bit moving forward. We're going to go around and hear a little bit more from each of our panelists with some specific questions, and then I'll move on to ask some general questions for all of our panelists here today, too. So, Kristen, I'd like to start with you. Actually, you are a recipient of a Sustainable Ocean Alliance micro grant, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about what that process was like for you, and really kind of how that's gotten to you, gotten Sati to where you are today. Give us that overview.
Yeah, for sure. So we applied for a micro grant at the end of last year, and um, uh, I'll talk a little bit about the grant and then about our business. But we applied for the micro grant last year, and we actually applied for it so that we could kind of dive a little deeper, specifically into the plastics that end up in the ocean, and talking more about how sanitary pads relates to that issue, or plastic pollution in general. And we did a whole 5 blog series, which kind of dives deeper into into that issue. And we were able to kind of look into, not only the role that sanitary pads play into this, but other menstrual products, and what are some of the ways that we can actually address this as well. So if we look at our business model, it's kind of a circular model, in the sense that we're using an agri-waste fiber in order to make our product, and that's the raw material that we use. And then we're producing the product in our own facility, so we have a lot of control over all the materials that go into the product, and therefore then what can be done with the product after it's used as well. So one of the exciting things is that we're looking at different ways that even our product can be upcycled after use. In compost, in like bio-toilets, things like that, to really close the loop and make sure that our products also don't end up anywhere they're not supposed to be, but that they also get kind of upcycled as well. And maybe we can go to the next slide. And then we're also exploring another issue, which is plastic credits. Today, plastic credits are really focused more on collection and recycling of plastic, and that's very nice, but it's also kind of maintaining the status quo. Because we're in manufacturing, we're trying to kind of be a responsible manufacturer, in the sense that we can actually control all of the materials that go into the product, and looking at how we can try to create this new idea of plastic avoidance credits, which are actually going to avoid making those plastic items in the first place. So we're replacing one for one a normally plastic product with a completely compostable alternative.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And apologies for the formatting on the slide. Will be available for conversation afterwards for everyone listening in too. I'm going to pass it over to Masha now from Planet Care. I met Masha virtually back in October 2020. She and all of her colleagues at Planet Care were part of our Ocean Solutions Accelerator third cohort. So I'm interested to hear and kind of where you were back in 2020 and where you are today. And as kind of Kristen mentioned, is your system closed loop? Tell us a little bit more about what that's like over at Planet Care.
Okay, happy to do that. I'm gonna give a little bit of an overview first. Yeah. So as I've already told you, I will be talking about microfiber pollution specifically today. So microfibers, they're just a group of microplastics, and they shed when we wash our clothes. And how is this relevant to ocean pollution? Well, the fact is, all of you that are here today, if we all looked at the clothes tag and that are sewn into our clothes, 60% of what we're wearing today, so 60% of all the clothes that are made today are made from synthetic fabrics. So think about your yoga pants, your running t-shirt, so polyester, nylon, acrylic, all that. So 60% of all the fabrics today are essentially plastic. And when we wash them, they shed millions of tiny microfibers that end up in the wastewater, go down the drain, and ultimately end up in the ocean. In fact, 35% of all the microplastics in the oceans come from our washing machines. To give you kind of like an illustration, that's as each and every one of us threw a full plastic bag worth of microfibers into the ocean every single week. So that's really a lot. And the story doesn't really end there. So these microfibers, they're tiny, they're highly mobile, and they have been found everywhere. So microfibers have been found at the deepest point of the ocean in the Mariana Trench. They have also been found in the polar regions. So they really, really are everywhere. As they move around, additional toxins bind to them, and marine organisms, they mistake them for food, and this then moves up the food chain, and ultimately in the fish we eat, in the seafood that we eat, we are also eating these microfibers with the special add-on of the toxins. So at Planet Care, we think this is unacceptable, and we are very committed to stopping this pollution. As I've already told you, we do that by making microfiber filters for washing machines. So here behind me, you can see our domestic retrofit microfiber filter. It's cartridge based. Over there you can see how a new and how a used cartridge looks like. This filter stops 90% of all the microfibers during every wash. So if you want, today you can stop polluting our oceans with microfibers. And you know, I'm biased, but I think this is great. But we really need to take a step back and have a look at the whole picture here, you know, because at Planet Care, we've always said that we need to make microfiber filters mandatory, you know. We need washing machines that have microfiber filters by default. So obviously, we are also developing a built-in microfiber filter. We've shown it for the first time at Change Now in Paris in May. You know, but it's the technology. We still need to make sure that this technology ends up in the washing machine. So that's why we need systemic change. We need policy change.
Right.
It really needs to be mandatory for the washing machines to have filters. You know, cars have filters. Why don't washing machines? And luckily, not luckily, you know, a lot of work has gone into this. and I'm not saying, you know, I'm not implying at all that Planet Care did this on our own, because we didn't. But the fact is that France was the first country that passed legislation that makes microfiber filters in washing machines mandatory. So from 2025 onwards, all new washing machines sold in France will have to be fitted with a microfiber filter. And this is really a big win. So back in 2017, when Planet Care started, this was not on the agenda. This was not on the table. So we've come a long way. And at Planet Care, we are very proud that this very filter was used as proof of concept, because we were talking with the French government before they passed this law. So they needed to see that a filter like this can be done, that it's effective, that's not troublesome to use. And also they needed to see that there was a demand for this, you know. And at that point, when we were talking with them, we already had thousands of users around the globe who are using these filters. So that showed them, you know, that people do not want washing machines that pollute the ocean. So at the moment, as it looks, you know, other countries will soon follow suit, hopefully. And like I've said, you know, we've come a really, really long way, but we still have a lot of work to do. And as I've mentioned before, at Planet Care, we're so grateful for everyone who's fighting the fight together with us. So we're so grateful for all our users. We call them ocean heroes that have already switched to microfiber-free laundry. We're so grateful to all the NGOs that we work with, because we're a startup business, but what we have to do as well is an incredible amount of awareness raising, because people simply do not know that they are polluting just because they're washing clothes. So if they don't know there's an issue, how they're going to do something about it. So we're very grateful for that. for organizations like the SOA, for the mainstream media that's kind of like picked up on the story and they are reporting about it more now than they did, on the scientists that are doing the research so that we understand, what this means for the nature and also for human health. So yeah, we really need all hands on deck to solve this.
Thank you, Masha. That's actually a really incredible segue to our third panelist, Emma, from the Women's Institute in the UK, because you have a model of work that is actually kind of building alongside what Masha is pointing to as part of the need here for more and more ocean heroes, which of course at Sustainable Ocean Alliance, we love to hear this perspective as well. So Emma, tell us a little bit more about the Women's Institute, and of course, given the immense size of your membership, how do you balance local, regional, national policies and priorities?
Thanks, Martha. Yeah, so as I mentioned before, we are the largest voluntary women's organisation in the UK. We have 200,000 members who are all active in their communities. So we know that over 90% of our members are volunteers to some extent in their local community. And we very much see an opportunity for women to act as what we call change agents in their local communities. So all of our campaigns involve activity at all the different levels. So if you look at our work on End Plastic Soup on microplastics, we very much wanted to raise awareness of the issue to start with. So we began working on this in 2017. At the time, there was really little to no coverage of this issue in the UK, whether that was media. It was not on the political agenda, and there were very few organisations working on this issue. So we actually started by encouraging members to take action in their own lives. So we encouraged them to think about their own behaviour in quite a broad sense. We very much think that we need to tackle the microplastics problem, but actually our patterns of consumption are part of that. This addiction we have to fast fashion, which is produced in ever more unsustainable ways, is a big part of the picture. So we focused on giving our members the knowledge and skills to take action in their own lives, thinking about how they washed their clothing, how they used it, and started reaching out at a national level to those organisations that we knew were working in the sector. So some of the innovators that were developing things like the Planet Care filter, solutions you could use in your own home. So at a national level, we sort of focused on that and getting the issue on the political agenda, while also trying our best to sort of support the international efforts. And I think, we think it's fantastic that there's the prospect of an international plastics treaty on the horizon, and we are very keen to kind of support the development of that. I would say, and I think we'd probably all agree in this room, that it's long overdue. We as the WI, we actually started raising awareness of the need for biodegradable plastics in the 1970s. That was a campaign we had in the 1970s, and it's somewhat unbelievable that it's taken us this long to get there. So we sort of try and approach all of our campaigning work across those three levels, if you like. But we do have our resolutions process, so we are a democratic organisation. So our work on microplastics came directly from the views of an individual WI member who heard about this issue of microfiber shedding and thought, hang on a minute, there's no coverage of this, no one knows the impact we're having. She brought it to the attention of the wider organisation, and that became our national campaign. So through that democratic process, we can bring together this diverse group of women from all over the country to campaign with one voice.
I love that, and I'm hoping that you all listening in can understand why we are so excited to bring together these panelists today to look at not only like new innovations and technologies, but also understanding how our individual actions are contributing to a broader systemic change, and exploring what that tension looks like. I think that's been a lot of the conversation that we've had here this week, and so eager to continue to unpack that, knowing that we're not going to necessarily arrive at one solution today. But I'd like to actually pass it back to all of you to understand, why microplastics. Tell us either, personally or on behalf of your organization, why focus on this issue? Why spend your time, your life working on your particular product? Kristen, I'd like to hear from you first.
Okay, thanks. So for us, we were looking at, when we started Sati, how we could address lack of access to menstrual products. in India. So at the time, only about 18% of women had access to sanitary pads. Today it's about 36%. But even those numbers are staggering, and at the same time, we were looking at how will we do this, or how can we kind of contribute to that uh, being able to provide more access. Is it needing to provide more products? Is it distribution? What are some of the solutions? So we looked at what solutions were available in the market, what people were kind of developing, and we saw that many solutions were looking even at just very cheap materials for the pads, obviously to bring down the cost. But the cheap materials, when you make pads from them, they're not as functional. And so then it kind of defeats the purpose of making them in the first place. And so we thought, well, okay, right now we have a product that has banana fiber in it. That's our absorbent. But then what else can we do? Can we do any more? Can we make our product completely biodegradable? Because most of the places that lack access are in rural areas of India. And in rural areas, you don't have landfills. So where does the trash go? It just ends up kind of in a community designated area that everyone says, okay, yes, this is where we will put all of the garbage, or maybe it ends up on the side of the road. But there isn't kind of a place to process or recycle or anything like that. So we felt like if we're going to be providing these pads, we didn't want to provide the pads and then create a plastic pollution problem. And so how could we kind of address both of these with a better solution? And that's kind of where our focus came into looking at how we can make our product plastic free, how we can make it bleach free also, because we don't want to have bleach in the most sensitive parts of our body, and see how we can kind of look at this from both a health and environment perspective.
Thank you, Kristen. Emma, tell us.
Yeah, so I mean, we are democratic, so this issue was really kind of a grassroots, issue identified by one of our members that, was one of almost 100 issues raised by the WI this year, and it was whittled down and debated and discussed. And, it was clear through that process that this issue about microplastic pollution was not being discussed enough. Our members were extremely concerned when they heard about it. And some of the science that was around at the time when we were discussing this, they found to be extremely shocking. So we shared a very short video, I'm sure many of you will have seen it, of some plankton ingesting a piece of microfiber. And that was so widely shared amongst our WI membership, and they were just appalled that this was happening at such a small scale. And so for us, it was, a kind of combination of this big outcry from our membership of women in communities across the UK, and also just this feeling that this issue, as Masha said, has just not had enough attention. It's one of those hidden issues that is not well known, but is so pernicious and pervasive in our environment that if we don't take urgent action, we are creating a tremendous negative legacy for the future. So for us, it was a kind of combination of those two things that drove our work on this.
Absolutely. I can hear that. Masha.
Yeah, so with Planet Care, I'm going to tell our founder's story, our founder, Moitza Zupan. She was a lawyer. She was a lawyer, and she was visiting a touring exhibition about marine litter in her hometown, Ljubljana, Slovenia. And for the first time there, she saw a microscopic image of microfibers, and she learned that just because she is doing her family's laundry, she's sending this incredible amount of pollution into the oceans. And she was appalled. She was like, how can that be, and why is no one doing anything about it? So she did the research. She found out, there really isn't a solution, and that's how Planet Care was born. And also, I wanted just to take this opportunity, Martha, before you asked me, about our closed loop service.
Yes.
So, and I kind of I didn't get to answer that before. But yeah, from the very beginning, she just said, okay, fine, if we make a filter, that's just the first step. Filtering the microfibers is just the first step. What that happens, with the used cartridge that you saw on the slide earlier. So that's why Planet Care, we run a fully closed loop service. That means that when our users have a sufficient amount of used cartridges, they pick up a range of free collection So we send a courier that collects the used cartridges, and they are sent back to us for refurbishment. So actually you can see that the cartridge is from two pieces. So the outer casing, that's like 95% of the whole cartridge, is washed and then fitted with a new filtering medium and sent back to customers. And then the inside, the filtering medium with the coat fibers, that's the 5%, that's really crucial. So for that, we've identified a solution to turn this filtering media into industrial insulation mats. So in short, we don't want to we're not going to landfill them, and also we will not incinerate them. So that's not an option. That said, fibers, as you know, you've picked up on, are incredibly light and incredibly small. So to turn them into industrial insulation pads, we really need sufficient quantities. So at the moment, we are safely storing them in our warehouse, but also at the same time, we are continuously looking for viable solutions if we can turn them into something else before that. So there's a solution on the table, but we're kind of like, we're keep on the lookout for something else so that we can kind of make use and repurpose them as soon as possible.
Great, great. Well, so in hearing about really the origin of your organization's approaches in I, in eliminating microplastics, I'm curious now to hear really what have some of the biggest challenges and obstacles been. Each of you have spoken to kind of promoting the message to individuals, to policymakers at the table, to actually telling the story of, Masha, you've shared some very specific statistics about what it's like every time we do our load of laundry. Tell us a little bit more from each of you. I'm actually going to start with Emma about what are some of the challenges and obstacles that you have in your work for this really overlooked issue.
Thank you. I think the lack of awareness, particularly amongst kind of political and government audiences, has been a real challenge. So sort of winding back, we started our campaign and we really felt the academic research identifying the presence of these fibres and the shedding rates of different materials was really there, but this hadn't really kind of broken through to government or to kind of key stakeholders. So one of the things we did as an organisation is do some research with our members, and that really found some quite shocking findings. So we did a survey with our members which identified that they were, the UK public could be doing up to 68 million loads of washing a week, and that could result into something like 9.4 trillion fibres released. So we knew that the scale of the problem... Oh,
okay.
Yeah, I can hear. Tell me if you can't hear me, anyone.
I need my mic. Mine is out.
Oh, okay.
I can't hear.
I'll carry on.
Yes.
So we identified this huge scale of the problem. And I think it's fair to say, in terms of our government, they have taken some positive steps. They know that plastic pollution is an issue.
Thank you.
They are very much focused on those kind of touchstone, maybe easier to solve issues. So we've seen microbeads banned, so that you can no longer have plastic microbeads in toiletry products. We've seen the ban of things like straws. But actually getting them to look at this holistic view of plastic waste, and particularly looking at plastic microfibres, has been a real challenge. And I'll just give you one example. So in the UK, we passed an Environment Act, which for the first time ever sets the ability for the government to set targets for waste reduction of particular waste streams. But that is done on the basis of, it's measured on the basis of the energy used to produce the product and the weight of the product. And microfibres, they don't use a huge amount of energy to produce, and they are very light. So actually, using those measures is just not suitable for those. And so it's been a real challenge, I think, to get the message across about actually we need action on not just those most visible kinds of plastic that you see every day, but the more hidden areas.
Thank you. Absolutely. And I'd like to hear from Kristen now as well.
Great, thanks. I think touching on some of the points you brought up in terms of banning straws and even also single-use plastics, sanitary pads in some ways actually would come under a single-use plastic because it's also made from the thin plastics that bags are made from and that sort of thing. But at the same time, I think there's a challenge of looking at, okay, well, what are people going to replace it with? How are people going to get all access to those things as well? So there's kind of the contradiction of those two things. And then I think one of the other challenges is when we started Sathi in the first place, we pitched this idea to many people, and most people said, well, you should focus on one side or the other, either focus on trying to provide access or focus on trying to make a compostable product, but don't do both because it doesn't make sense. Kind of thinking in that like startup mindset of having to focus on one issue, but I think we were very stubborn and said that, well, it doesn't make sense to separate these two things because they're actually related. The better, like pads made from better materials are actually better for our health in the long run too. And that's why I think I get also a little bit frustrated seeing like people talk about plastic, the microplastic. They're already finding microplastics in our placenta, in our bodies, and then there's always the phrase, oh, well, we don't know what the exact health implications are. We don't really need, I don't think, any more data. We can know enough, I think, that we should be trying to eliminate them, and we can find out. I mean, I'm not saying not to research that further, but we don't need to wait in order to take action now. And then another issue, I think, for us is also that menstruation in general is not a common, fun topic for everyone to talk about all the time. And I sometimes forget that because I talk about it all the time now. But I think for us also there's a strong taboo when we're trying to talk to people about, oh, well, we make sanitary pads, you make what? And so it's kind of like getting over that first hump of, okay, is that, let's, now that we've gotten over the fact that, okay, this is what we do, now we can talk more about some of the other issues and address some of the other things that really matter in terms of health and sustainability.
And I love that you point to really the importance of that intersectionality, right? Of seeing it from both perspectives. And it's almost kind of ironic to me as well. You point to, Emma, like, being able to see what's not visible. And, you're working also particularly on a solution that affects women. And so we're also seeing how all of this is really intersecting to elevating this as an issue. So lots of complexity here that's important for us to sit with. Masha, what are some of the biggest challenges in Planet Care's world, in your world, in tackling this issue?
Yeah, what's left? I mean, no, I really agree with Emma and Christine. So, the lack of awareness, I've already talked about that at, 2017 when we were starting, everyone was microfibers. What microfibers? And then there was really this obstacle, when we were starting to approach potential partners. They were, well, no, this is, it's not on the agenda, or we're not required to do this. No one wants this. Why bother? So yeah, the lack of awareness, and it's gotten better, but it still has to get a lot better. As I already said at the very beginning, just the fact that in the blue zone, when you're going to events, kind of like the big plastic debris, etc., is very much more mainstream than microplastics is. And I also fully agree with you that yes, research is being done, but then why wait? Microplastics was also found in human blood, and it's not been there at the beginning, so it cannot do any good. So I fully agree. Let's not wait. So this is again kind of like our call to policymakers, because we've seen what happened in France. Now from 2025 onwards, washing machines will have to have a microfiber filter, so things start moving. Yes, I think that really covers it.
Thank you, and thank you all for your patience as we explore our adjusting headsets to this panel. All right, so I'd like to ask now, given the work on the upcoming plastics treaty negotiations, what do you think that governments and policymakers need to consider in order to combat this microplastic pollution? Each of you have kind of spoken to this in different ways, but Emma, I think that I'd like you to kick us off, and then after that, I'd like to invite Emma or invite Kristen or Masha to comment from there.
Yeah, thank you. Can I just say, Kristen, we are so supportive of what you are doing, and we are a big supporter of a campaign in the UK called Environmenstrual, which does exactly what you're trying to do, which is trying to tackle the stigma about talking about menstruation and also look at sustainable alternatives. So it's fantastic to hear what you're doing. I suppose in terms of the plastics treaty, I mean, I think, as I said before, we feel this is long overdue, and so it's fantastic it's happening. Because essentially microplastics don't respect borders, do they? This is not an issue that you can tackle on a kind of country by country basis. And I definitely feel, if I take the activity that our members are doing in their own lives, they're trying to recycle more, and obviously those plastics, when it's single-use plastics, they are being shipped to another country to be processed, and we very much feel that in some ways we're shipping the problem elsewhere. Similarly, thinking about our clothing habits, we know that fast fashion is an interconnected industry. It crosses country borders, and so to solve these problems we need international action. And I definitely think that our hundreds of thousands of women across the UK will be saying to their political leaders, come on, we cannot afford to delay any further on these issues. And what we need from them is a much more fundamental change. We are all here trying to tackle this problem at the levels we have access to, whether that's local, international or national, but actually we need to move much more to a circular economy. We need to look at the way we consume, produce and use plastic, and what is the waste stream for that on a global level. And without that kind of fundamental change, we don't believe we're going to achieve the change we need. So we would be sending them, our political leaders in the UK and elsewhere, a really strong message. Firstly, let's not delay, and secondly, it's got to be about a fundamental change rather than kind of piecemeal activity.
Absolutely. Masha, Kristen, I'd like to invite you to respond to that. Masha, I know you've spoken a lot about what you all have done and what's happening now in France, but as you comment on this too, I'm also curious to hear a little bit more from each of you on what some of the biggest gaps are right now in advancing not just the treaty, but in your work moving forward as well.
Well, I would say, again, it's just an appeal not to overlook microplastic
Yes.
issue. Again, so making sure that's in the treaty as well, and that besides just regulating it, also making sure that we're thinking about it, what happens afterwards, Some of it will be released, if and how, when we capture it, what are we going to do with it? So kind of like really holistically looking at the whole cycle and really shifting to the circular economy, as Emma said.
I think also one of the things that we have tried to talk more about is looking at manufacturing and what are the incentives that manufacturers get. So, for example, we talked about on the panel earlier about looking at, okay, well, we want to make sure that people are thinking about, consumers are thinking about, what are the products they use, but, consumers only can consume whatever things are provided, and so the manufacturers also need to be responsible for what it is they produce, how they produce it, what materials they use, and in looking at that, on the same side, like seeing earlier there was a lot of press about the period tax, or the tampon tax, and that generated a lot of excitement, and people said, oh, let's get rid of the tampon tax. And there are two sides to that. One side is, of course, the fact that there are higher prices for women's products than for men's products. That's one thing to address. But the other thing to address is from a very technical perspective. If we're buying material, that is actually taxed as well, and so those taxes are what gets passed on to the consumer. So just by eliminating the tax on the product, it actually doesn't make the price reduce in the grand scheme of things. So if we want to say, well, these products shouldn't be taxed in general, then that should be something that the government would say, okay, so then all the materials you purchase as a manufacturer of these products are also not going to be taxed as well, or they're going to get an exemption. And the other thing would be then looking at materials. So let's say, manufacturers should be incentivized to purchase sustainable materials rather than plastics. So if they purchase plastics, sure, whatever tax is there, fine. But if you're purchasing sustainable materials, maybe it's a lower tax to kind of incentivize the change and the switch, because again, it does need to be systemic. It can't be just like one person. I mean, we need everything to happen all at once. Like we need individuals to make decisions today on what it is they can choose purchase, but we also need manufacturers and governments to kind of accelerate that change and move it forward a little faster.
Thank you all. And Kristen, just on that final thought you offered of we really need everything to happen all at once. I mean, what does success look like for each of your organizations in the next 5 to 10 years? If we if we can't get everything all at once, I know that's still possible. However, if we can't get it all at once, what are some of the ways that you'll be measuring success in the next 5 to 10 years? Let's start with Masha.
Well, at Planet Care, in the future, we want each and every washing machine, new and existing, domestic, commercial, and industrial, to be equipped with a microfiber filter. So this is really what we're working towards, and then with that, everything else kind of happens as well. From individual behavior change that we've addressed, and then to the systemic quality change. But yeah, a future with microfiber filters in all washing machines.
Yes, here's to that. Emma, what about for you at the Women's Institute?
Yeah, and we definitely support that as well, and we are pushing for filters in the UK. I mean, I think for us, 5 to 10 years on a UK level, we just need to see political leadership on this point. Civil society's there, research is there. What we don't have is political leadership, and so we would be wanting to see our government taking kind of firm steps to regulate the release of things like microplastics at all levels. Part of the picture for us is filters, but I suppose, looking in that kind of medium term, we'd want to see more work looking at things like, what materials are our clothing made of, what can we do around kind of fabric construction, because we know that can actually make a huge difference in terms of shedding levels. So I guess moving back up the value chain, we want to see bigger action. And at an international level, I suppose, we want to be in a world where we have a plastics treaty which sets out some binding targets for reducing and mitigating the impacts of plastic pollution. And I think if we are not in that place in 5 to 10 years, we are going to be in a seriously bad situation, aren't we? So we're going to be pushing very hard to make that happen and make that forthcoming treaty a strong and robust and powerful one.
Yes, thank you. Kristen?
So one of the things is that we're trying to build in the short term. We want to scale up our manufacturing units so that we can make more products and deliver them to more women. In the next 5 years, we're looking to reach about 10 million women with our product, and that will have we also measure a number of other metrics as well. So amount of income increased for farmers because we're purchasing and agri-waste from farmers, the number of women that we employ, and then also the amount of plastic waste eliminated. So that would be about 18,000 metric tons in the next 5 years, and 21,000 metric tons of CO2 emissions reduced as well. And we're looking in the long term to be a model for sustainable manufacturing. So we really do believe that kind of the way that we're doing our business, we want to make sure we have all of the impacts built in, so that as we grow, all of the impacts will grow as well. And that's everything from health to sustainability, and seeing how we can give back to the community, because that's very important to what we do and where we do it. So, yeah.
Great. So as we kind of get ready to close here, I have two closing questions for you each. First of all, I'd like to hear what impact you each are recently celebrating. What's a recent win or something that you're feeling particularly proud of for each of your organizations? And then as you look out to the folks tuning in here today, what is something that each of us or listening in can do for you, can do for Planet Care, for the Women's Institute, for Sati? Emma, would you like to start?
Yeah, very happy to start. So we've been really pleased that we've been able to, on a UK level, and actually more international, bring together cross-sector stakeholders who are all particularly interested in this issue about microfiber shedding. So we formed the first, it's called an all-party parliamentary group. That's a group within our parliament made up of members of parliament who all have an interest in microplastics. So we formed that group in 2020. We published our first research report last year which sets out a lot of key recommendations for the government, one of which is the fitting of microfiber filters in washing machines. And we're pleased that our government has pledged to go away and look at it. So we are pushing them very hard to make that happen. So that has been a really key success, because that was the first time we'd really had industry, NGOs and academics all together in a room talking about these issues on a UK level. And I suppose what you can do for us is, we have a huge tradition of partnership working as an organisation. We work across many areas aside from environment, violence against women, women's health, and we really rely on having great partners to support us in our work, and vice versa to support each other. And I do think the message from this conference that from the events I've been, is that we need to be better at joining together and speaking with that one voice. So we would be very happy to speak to and talk to anyone in this room who wants to work together on microplastics, and try and bring us together, I suppose, so that we can speak truth to power.
Thank you, Emma. Kristen.
Yeah, so I think one of the milestones that we just hit recently is that we were able to distribute 1 million pads, and we had an initiative that we started early on called our 1 million pads initiative, that we wanted to distribute 1 million pads to women who didn't have access, and so we're very excited about that. And then in terms of the things that we are looking for, or ways that you can help, we're looking to connect to sustainability heads at big companies that are interested in trying out plastic avoidance credits to, again, incentivize systemic change. And then the other thing is that we're working to scale up our manufacturing unit. So if you know people that are interested in either our product or interested in kind of the work that we're doing, might be interested to support us in our scale-up journey, that would be great.
Thank you, Kristen. Masha.
Yes, so a few milestones for us. I think a big one definitely was in Paris when we showcased our built-in filter. So that was kind of like a big milestone for Planet Care. Also, just kind of like taking it back to to our ocean heroes. I think we're nearing 200,000 bags worth of pollution prevented. So I think this is something worth recognizing and celebrating as well. But then just, always when we're talking with our customers and with people that use our filter, we always say, apart from the fact that you are stopping microfiber pollution today, you are really fueling a much broader transition, kind of like talking back to the story that I told about the French legislation that, if we didn't have the users, we wouldn't be able to show that there actually is a demand for such a product on the market. So our ocean heroes really are amazing, and we're really grateful to all of them. And I don't want to say, what anyone can do for us, but I would rather say, what all of us can do for all of us, because we are all in this together. I would say start thinking about your clothes and how you do your laundry. I know it's a chore at the end of the day, but just be mindful. What kind of clothes do you wear? How much do you wash them? How do you wash them? All these things also make a difference. And then going back to the point of the lack of the awareness, educate yourself and then tell everyone about it. If you have, talk to your MPs, talk to the politicians, so that we really push the microplastics pollution into the spotlight, because it's been not discussed about enough.
Thank you. And I must say that through this conversation, I'm building more and more of a visual of what this transition looks like, right? What it actually looks like to live in a planet alongside our ocean, alongside our humans, and to have a world with fewer microplastics, with new solutions, new policies in place, to really get us to the kind of just transition and the thriving community and planet that we all envision here today. So I'd like to join you all, to invite you all to join me in thanking Masha from Planet Care, Emma from the Women's Institute in the UK, and Kristen from Sati Sanitary Pads. Will be here to have further conversations and remember what they've offered for recommendations for you, and also how you can support them. And thank you all so much for joining here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Martha. Thank you.